flesh out the rest of it. So let's take a look at what they're doing to some of these champions though. So Sion has been extremely oppressive for a few months now. Basically the most reliable solo queue top laner tank, and also is picked in competitive play a ton. They're nerfing the base damage on his E release slightly. So this is the bigger part. The base damage was nerfed slightly, but the damage doesn't get amped by the 30% that it does up here. So this was 210 times 1.3, which would have been another 63 damage on top, so it would be 273, whereas now it's only going to be 205. So that means he's actually losing as much as like 25% damage on his poke, which is actually incredibly potent. The other thing he's going to get, though, is he's going to get his armor pen, not just on if you yell at the target, but if you yell at a minion to go through somebody, or if you yell like Scuttle Crab or anything it might be. So this can make it a little bit better in lane if you get into an extended fight with somebody. I don't think it's going to offset the amount of raw damage you're going to lose, but you can get 20% pen. So in a scenario where you have like your jungler and your jungler does 80 damage, that could actually be like relatively potent. Like it could increase like the overall damage that you guys do in that scenario. It might make him a little bit better at fighting other tanks, and tank versus tank and top at the moment are very popular. But this is an extremely potent nerf. This will make ranged champions able to poke him a lot easier. And then the duration going up is kind of whatever. Like this means that he will do a little more damage when he ults into you, because normally you ult E and then you charge up your Q and you get both knockups together, and the Q does a lot of damage. So this will give him a little bit more damage later in the game, but still, like the amount of flat he's losing is uninspiring. Like it's just going to hurt him way more than he gains from it, and it's going to make ranged matchups in particular really hard for him. So Sion, quite a bit nerfed. Ranged champions, like we'll probably see more Gnar into him if he doesn't have E Comet to poke down things like Gnars reliably. So Gnar, probably a big pick back into him, and then even a lot of melee champions that don't have big sustain get bullied out by just shit getting screamed at them. So this will probably bring him right back in line and make him have to actually contest people a little more, because this encourages him to fight, to like actually fight after yelling at something. So Mundo, they overshot with last patch's buffs. His win rate went up a ton, and he's like one of the best champions in the game now. So instead of taking away any of the health that they just gave him or reverting some of the buff they just did, they're instead going to make his ult cost a little more, so you have to be a little bit more cognizant of when you're using it. I don't think this really changes much, because he's going to be too tanky to get burst down for an extra 5% anyway, so I don't think this really matters. And then 10 seconds at rank 1 is pretty negligible, all things considered. 20 seconds later, you might feel that a little bit in like split push scenarios, but I think he'll still be really good. He'll still be really good into mono damage type teams, because he can out regen and build really efficiently. Mundo has historically been extremely strong into dual magic damage teams, because they tend to have lower DPS. So if he can survive through the initial burst, then he can heal through it. And then if he survives through the initial burst, then it doesn't really matter if this costs 5% more. And it doesn't really matter if the cooldown's a little bit longer, because he's only going to get one use off in a team fight anyway. So this can hurt his split pushing a little bit. Maybe his ability to run somebody down in lane as often. But I don't think these hurt his overall power level like a ton, not compared to like the buff that he got last patch, so he'll be fine. Poppy, 5 movement speed. I think Poppy is actually fine. She has a ton of unique utility, and she can pick fights reliably now since the changes last patch with her ultimate. She actually does pretty high damage for a tank in early mid game, and her reliability in team fights is incredibly potent, because if she knocks anybody out of the team fight, you basically win it for free. If she knocks somebody up, now it's even easier for people to follow up out of that, and I don't think Poppy really is in a bad place. But if they want to encourage people to play her a tiny bit, that's what these kinds of buffs normally are. If somebody gets like 5 movement speed or like 1 armor or like 5 damage on a skill, that's just Riot trying to remind the community like, hey, this champion exists, like you guys should put a couple games into it and see how it feels. Like that's because Riot must not think that the champion needs like meaningful buffs, so rather than give it meaningful buffs, they give it like a little placebo buff, a small buff, and then it encourages people to play it more, and then they get a better read for how powerful the champion actually is once people are playing it. So this isn't like anything notable, but I think Poppy's in a fine place regardless, and her reliability for like her team fight impact got increased last patch, so she's just really good. Not really good, not compared to like the current top laner tanks, but is very playable and counters certain things like Fiora and even OK into like Gnar, things like that. So Zac lost the ability power ratio on his W. These don't matter. Nobody builds AP. Well, I mean, maybe if these ratios are higher, like 0.2 and 0.2, maybe you can build Runic Echoes, because 0.4 more ratio would actually give you a pretty meaningful amount of burst of Runic Echoes. But nobody really builds AP on Zac unless they were going to do it like first item. So I don't think this is really anything like cool, but I mean, I guess it's like to encourage alternative playstyles, but nobody plays Zac in an alternative playstyle, or they're gonna get flamed by their team. So, yeah. Bard. They're making him into an e-girl. 20 mana cost off is actually pretty significant. That's like 20% of like the current mana cost. So that's maybe a little. Is it a little more? It's a little more than 20%. So this is actually quite a bit of mana that he's going to save in lane, and he ends up playing a role a lot of the time where he ends up like leaving these behind while he goes like to look for like roams, or while he collects chimes, or while he gets like a better angle for his Q or something. So this will give him more mana to look for roams and stuff like that. On roaming champions, mana costs are actually really important. So that's why Riot nerfs mana costs on Taliyah, because they want Taliyah to have to spend mana, so she has to make more decisions of whether she's going to leave lane or not. So when you have like a roaming champion like Bard likes to move around, like look for like an ultimate, look for a good angle to get like stuns into walls or multi-stuns on people, and go through walls with his E. Like he wants to be off to the side, find those angles. Then if you give them more mana, then they find a lot more opportunities to do those, and it can make them a lot more reliable for what they're looking for. So these kinds of buffs for these kinds of champions are normally actually they're a little more potent than it would seem at a glance, but I don't think this like makes Bard like a priority pick or anything, but it's I like the direction. How about that? Kindred. If an ally kills a jungle monster within 6 seconds, she still gets the stack. Alright, so this is the most infuriating thing in the world sometimes. You're doing like a camp and then every fucking laner just feels so entitled to like your jungle monsters. So instead of like you getting your stack, like they feel entitled that like at this stage in the game, like they should be taking your jungle monsters, and since they feel like they should have your jungle monsters, then they walk by and they one-shot the thing from half, and you didn't want to smite it because you want to save smite for neutral objectives. I'm not ranting, by the way. And then they end up denying you a stack as Kindred, which feels super bad. So this is a great change, because I don't have to flame my teammates when they take my marks, because Kindred's power is heavily gated behind her marks. So if my team is hindering my power, then I feel real bad. So if it's harder for them to hinder my power, then that's great. Great change. Okay, Runic Echoes. Many junglers, even though mage junglers have been pretty scarce on Rift for a while. We're looking to change that. Changing the build path to grant mana and cooldown reduction. Alright, so let's look at the build path. Oh, it builds out of Lost Chapter. Oh. I assume this is for red smite too. They're just showing the blue smite, but there's no way it's only for one. That would be really silly. So Lost Chapter is really, really good to build into, and it would help junglers a lot, because they normally level in the jungle, and then they can, if they know that they're going to level off a jungle camp, then they can do that jungle camp to get the mana back, and then when they get the mana back, they'll be enabled to gank more. So this will give mage junglers a lot more opportunities to gank, especially when they don't have blue buff early, or if they give up like the second blue buff or something like that. Sometimes mage junglers really struggle with that. And then they're losing a little bit of movement speed, which feels bad as any jungler. Movement speed's a great stat. But you're getting way more budget in mana and CDR here. So this is definitely a huge buff to the item overall. And this is a buff to Elise, this is a buff to Nidalee, this is a buff to a lot of the tank junglers that would take it, because cooldown reduction can be like a tank stat too. So like let's say Gragas takes this now, then Gragas now gets CDR and he gets more mana to be able to fish for things. So Gragas now gets CDR, which gives him damage reduction via his W and more disruption through his ER and Q. So Gragas then, by proxy of getting CDR here, this is a tankier item for him. So this is much more powerful like after the changes than it is now, and we can see tank junglers leaning on this more, because it enables them to look for more opportunities to gank early, when tank junglers normally have very few opportunities to gank early. Warding Totem. These changes increase the value of a well-placed ward, so they last longer. Oh, they last a ton longer early. Oh, but they have a much longer cooldown. Okay. So they used to have a shorter cooldown later. So there's a shorter cooldown. So it still has a longer cooldown at all stages, but it lasts longer at all stages. It lasts 50% longer at all stages, but it doesn't have a 50% longer cooldown at all stages. So Yeah, this is Elise in there, right, Photon. This makes actually. See, I disagree with the idea here. All right, so the idea here is that this increases the value of a well-placed ward, right? I do agree it increases the payoff for successful ward sweeping because of how long they last, but I disagree that this increases the value of a well-placed ward because, I mean, for most lanes, you're going to put a ward in a specific spot, and that spot just gives you, like, guaranteed safety, basically. So it's not like you're making a big decision of where to put your ward, right? Like, anybody can go to the river and put down a damn ward, and then, like, you're supposed to play around that timing. So this makes it harder to play around ward timings because, like, especially in, like, the power windows that junglers have, like, this covers, like, a long time, right? Like, a minute and a half is a long time for a jungler to be on that side trying to play around, like, a warding window. So this alone, without the jungle item stuff, I think would actually give laners a lot more safety against early jungler pressure if they wanted to target that. It would give them a little bit less safety later, but later you normally already know, like, if the jungler gets to like a certain position, then you're going to die because they either have enough damage, or if you're in bot lane and you have other ward tools, or you're controlling pinks around mid as like a jungle mid duo or whatever. So I don't know if I completely agree with the idea here, but this is an interesting change. It'll be a lot harder to play around certain ones. But like, let's say you get punished for one bad ward, you can get punished for like a really long time following. So it might be easier to snowball on somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. But this should reward because players have really clear timing windows that they normally capitalize on. So if you can put a longer ward down for that timing window that's normally pretty obvious, then I think this is just like a buff to players that know how to use them. And that have like a basic understanding of the game. Maybe the logic here is right then. Increase the value of a well-placed ward, but like a well-placed ward doesn't take a lot of thought. Increase the cost of a battle. Yeah, it's going to punish players that don't really understand wording like really hard and don't understand like the timings that they should be looking for. So maybe this is the right wording, but I don't necessarily like agree with the idea. Because I think this just makes Windows to play around a lot harder. And the harder that Windows get to play around, then the more stale that a game becomes because the more because the safer people can play. Jungle items, so you can't own any jungle and support items together. So some junglers are buying support items so that they can get later sightstones, so they can help that way. Some mid laners are going like Spell Thief still and going that way. I think Nasus, I've seen a bunch of Nasus go like Ancient Coin or something, and I don't really know why, to be honest, but sick. Don't think this is a notable change. Maybe a little bit for competitive play at best. So cheap shot. Whoa, that's a lot more damage later in the game. This scales a lot better now. 60 damage. This means if you're ahead, because this scales with level, if you're ahead, this will actually scale really well. Because this doesn't have like meaningful scaling, but 15 to 60, 60 is like pretty meaningful. And this has a low cooldown. It has like a 4-second cooldown or something, I think, for like when it can trigger. And they're just putting more of the power of this into the upfront rather than over time. So Ingenious Hunter is actually already really good, especially if you're running Predator, especially if you're running like let's say you're Skarner, right? And you're Skarner, and then you have your Oracles. And this means you can get 40% CDR for your Oracles, which is crazy. It's going to be up all the damn time. And then you can also get 40% CDR for your Righteous Glory. You can get 40% CDR for your Predator, and the availability of like pressure windows that it gives you is like so much higher when you take this rune. So I actually think this rune is already incredibly valuable. People don't take it a lot of the times because a lot of the champions that are played right now don't like it, but for champions that already like actives and for supports, I think this is like already one of the best runes in the game. So moving the power around, this doesn't change the overall value of it at all, but it makes it a little bit more potent early. It does work on trinkets, yes. Phase Rush. This is a buff to Aurelion Sol. And who else? Karthus? I don't know. This isn't notable. The champions that it's already good on, this won't make like a big impact on like their win rate or anything, but the champions that it's already good on, they'll take it. Great. Swain does take it, true. Demolish. Not a bad rune as is. I think it's just in a tier where it's in the same tier as Bone Plating, right? Like that's the problem, right? I've seen Karthuses go Phase Rush. I don't know. I've seen some Karthuses go Phase Rush, anyway. Like a couple recently. I don't know who goes Phase Rush, dude. All right, Demolish. So this is a good rune. I'm pretty sure this rune is just in the same tier as bone plating, which even with this nerf is broken. So if these are in the same tier, then it doesn't matter. This would have to do like 500 damage for people to fucking take it over this. So I mean, yeah, like the two I've seen two recently that went phase rush, but I don't know if they're one tricks or they're just having a Karthus spree. This is still good. Chrysalis is still good overall because it still gives you like the safety you want early on like slower scaling champions, and then you just turn into damage from there. They go Predator Karthus? That sounds super silly. So yeah, if Demolish is still in the same tier as Bone Plating, then this doesn't change anything, and this is still super good. Like 15 flat damage. That just means because it triggers 3 times, right? So that's 45 flat damage taken off of any trade early, and 45 flat damage is an incredibly high amount. Like, it's really hard to play around. Oh, they're giving some of the time back to Stopwatch as well. So Stopwatch might be a little more competitive again. I actually doubt that many people would take it. Unless like your champion builds one of those items as a core item anyway, then there's no real reason for people to be taking it. So, because otherwise it's just generally like you don't get as much value out of it as you could. So this might be valuable on certain champions that already go Inspiration and they want to buy like a Zhonya's or a Guardian Angel or something, I guess, instead, but these aren't very notable. The Cheap Shot one is the biggest one. Phase Rush not super notable. The champions to take it will still take it. Yeah, Stopwatch was super good for like 5-minute timer, but 8-minute is a long time. Might be more common in bot lane to like stop dives and like slow the game down a little bit. But it also enables dives in the same vein. And then Bone Plating just outclasses like Demolish. I'm pretty sure they're in the same tier, so that doesn't really matter. Alright, and then this is something I wanted to look at. So this will take a second. So junglers have had too much of an impact in the early game. Specifically, they're too frequently able to gank at level 3 before solo laners even reach that level. Alright. That's been a feature of the game for like 6 years. That junglers at level 3 are the strongest champions on the map for a brief period because they are higher level at that period than the laners, but then for the rest of the game they end up lower level than laners. That is the one period in the game that people have to play around where junglers are probably the strongest champions on the map. That is the only period in the game you have to play around where junglers are the strongest champions in the game. It has been that way for 6+ years. I don't know why junglers are having such an impact now in the same timing window that people have been dealing with for 6 years. I don't think it is any different than it has been for quite some time. And in fact, I think snowballing, because stuff goes to like team gold, like in theory should be a little bit harder than like it used to be. Like I'm pretty sure they changed like kill gold down here, but like in theory, like it shouldn't be any worse now than it was then. So I don't agree with that sentiment because that's always been a thing, and it's just this one power point in the game that you have to worry about and you have to be cognizant of, and that's just something that we've always had to think about. And I don't necessarily think it's an issue because we've played the game that way for years, and it's really telegraphed. Like if you get the slightest bit of information early, then you can tell every timing window their jungler is going to have. You know what side of the map he's going to be on, so we know what sides need to play careful for like 1 minute, and like what like I don't agree with this. Like junglers used to be able to get level 4 in their first clear before some some laners would hit like level 3. Like, we've had periods like that too. I don't know. Anyway, so what's the idea here? Experience no longer reduces by 5% per level. You're ahead of the camp taken. Okay, so this caps out at 7. Make junglers useless, please. So we get less EXP, less. Krugs is similar. Krugs are more. More people are going to take Krugs. Look at that. Nobody takes Krugs right now. So we're going to make Krugs better. Sick. So this is just like a flat reduction across the board, it looks like. So the big raptor can be worth more. The little raptors aren't. So we're just losing shit on every single camp. Okay. So this takes an extra camp, right? Like that was the idea. And then they wanted to put a lot of EXP into the Scuttler, was it? Yeah. So he spawns at 2 minutes. At initial spawn, Scuttlers will spawn in top and bottom river. Both must be killed before the timer activates. Once both are killed, only one Scuttler can be on the map at any given time. It's randomly determined but signaled ahead of time with a marker. Respawn is now 2 minutes 15 seconds. and now it gives as much EXP as a regular camp, if not more. So as you get past the first couple levels, this gives more EXP than basically any camp. Huh. Rift Scuttler isn't the hotly contested objective we'd like it to be. Of course it's not. You can fucking kill the thing with one fucking skill and a smite. Of course it's not a hotly contested objective. You walk up to it and it insta-dies. What? Hello? They gave it 400 more health. Okay. So now instead of insta-dying, it'll take a couple skills or a couple autos. You know, if they put power into Scuttle, this is a big nerf to champions that don't have a way to CC Scuttle, because Scuttle is disproportionately tanky for champions that can't CC Scuttle Crab too. So if like Scuttle Crab becomes a lot more valuable gold-wise and becomes the most efficient EXP camp, then any champion that can't reliably CC the Scuttle Crab becomes a lot worse at taking Scuttle Crab early, and they become a lot worse in their initial clears at like contesting it because of how little damage they do to it. It's like a big time investment for them. So like let's say you're playing something like Nidalee or Lee Sin, they don't have any way to take the armor away, so that's actually going to take them like a pretty meaningful amount of time to deal with it. Whereas like if I'm playing Rek'Sai, I can literally unburrow, do my 3 autos, E it for true damage, and then smite it, and it's probably dead, like in my like 2-second combo. Whereas like Lee Sin or Nidalee are going to have to chase this thing down for like 5+ seconds. So putting a lot of power into the Scuttle Crab when it's not created equal for junglers is interesting, because like at least with regular camps, like they're relatively even though like different camps favor different junglers. But like Rift Scuttler has like a gimmick to it to like kill it faster, which like a lot of junglers just can't do anything about. So I think this is unhealthy to put power into Scuttle Crab, and I don't like Scuttle Crab being more EXP than any like playing jungle camp, because this encourages earlier game junglers too. Because if you're an early game jungler, then you can bully the other person off the Scuttle Crab really easily. A lot of times when I do the Scuttle Crab with Elise, I don't like cocooning it, because I like to save my cocoon if there's the risk that they can be on that side. I don't know if I like these changes. We'll get Scuttle at 2. I don't know if I like these changes. So, can you still level to 3 off of doing 3 camps, or do we need extra camps now? I'll have to test this in game. This looks like... does this give enough EXP? What, does it scale aggressively enough? If we can't get 3 in 3 camps somehow, even if we have to like contest something in the river, then like it's off 2 plus Scuttle, or otherwise it's like 4 camps. It's 2 plus Scuttle, or it's 4 camps. Buff golems. Alright, so yeah, but golems takes forever. Like doing all the golems takes forever. Okay. So this will severely hinder jungle pressure early then, if they have to, because that makes their jungle route even more guaranteed, right? Because now if you want to do a fast route, you have to involve Scuttle Crab in it. But if your champion's not quick at killing Scuttle Crab, then you're shit out of luck. And if you can't kill Krugs in a meaningful amount of time, then you're going to be super slow on your 3 anyway. And if you're super slow on your 3, then you're not going to be able to put pressure on lanes. So like realistically, instead of like you being level 3 before solo laners reach level 3, bot lane is going to hit level 3 by the time you'd hit level 3 if you're like doing 4 camps to do it. So that means that like all stages in the game, then you're probably going to be like lower level than every solo lane, and maybe bot laners as the game progresses, because it's not like you're getting extra EXP as the game progresses. You get a little bit on Krugs, a tiny bit on the large Razorbeak, but overall you're just losing EXP. So we're just going to level quite a bit slower as the game progresses. That's really interesting. Will mid laner ward Scuttler? Mid laners might ward Scuttle. I mean, there's a really common spot by mid that people already ward, where they ward like by the exit to the jungle. So if you ward there anyway, you're gonna see if they're going toward the Scuttle Crab. So warding there before, like around 2 minutes after they would do like their second camp, could be like really viable. That increases the value of that ward in particular. That exit ward is really valuable as is. These are really interesting changes, because I don't think like this has never been an issue before, so it's crazy that like these changes seem like pretty steep. Like we're gonna be a lot less impactful early as a jungler. You're gonna get out leveled by lanes most of the game. I'll have to experiment with like different clears and stuff, but that looks rough. Items. All right, we'll go past it. We'll feel it out in game. So the damage does more, quite a bit more. The heal does more. Damage over 5 seconds is no longer amped. What are the best level 2 junglers? If people are getting low in the jungle, like lower, because they can't clear the camps as fast and they're staying lower level, then Kha'Zix is actually pretty okay. Lee has a pretty good 2. Skarner definitely does a good 2 with QE. Olaf has like the best like 1 through 5 in like the fucking game if he can get to you. Damage over 5 no longer amped to 75. Okay, so this is a good change, because there's no reason for this to like be centered toward only tanks. So it just does more damage baseline for everybody that's not a tank. Kindred is a pretty good too. She can kite people. First large monster killed grants 220 bonus experience. Okay, so we get the EXP here. So we always get level 2 off the first camp, even though we wouldn't get it otherwise. Okay. So this is where they're moving the EXP to. All the more reason that if you ever forget like to take smite and you can't buy a jungle item, you might as well just like FF the game. These are good changes because this is a lot of mana, like flat mana that you can get. And then this just gives you, like, everybody takes Machete right now, so Talisman being buffed is fine, like, especially for AoE style junglers, like, Talisman should be a viable option, and the fact that it's always outclassed by Machete, basically, is a problem. Damage on hits going up, it's losing the attack speed, so this is a little better for champions with low cooldown auto resets, because they don't use the attack speed as much anyway, but I assume with the 10 damage, this is still, like, an overall slight buff compared to 15% attack speed, because 10 flat damage is quite a bit early. But it's probably really close. Might hurt some of the more auto-attack oriented junglers a little bit, but... So Talisman will be a little bit more of an option. I could actually see, like, some of the champions that should want to take it. Like, I might take it on Elise now for early mana and to help her clear the AoE camps, when before I would always take Machete. I might still take Machete on Elise. Inheriting the changes. So this is all the same stuff, just moved onto these items as well. Actually, Talisman doesn't suck as much. That's actually really good. And then Bounty. Is this the end of it? Yeah, this is basically the end. So currently, the rewards a player gets for performing well are 2 split amongst the whole team. We'll be looking to remedy that over time. We're starting this patch with Bounty, shifting the reward from one team to a personal one. So you don't get any kill gold from... So a lot of the times that you kill somebody, you get like 100 or 150 gold for the team, because you're getting that the 1 or 2 kill. Wait, so we're just getting less gold across the board, huh? Yeah. So you'll get more individual gold, but overall, this will, like, you won't snowball as hard off of, like, getting, like, kills on players with, like, 1 or 2 kills, because, like, these are a lot of the ones that you get. So this is actually, like, basically saying, like, if it's a 1 kill per kill, then, like, before you would get 400 gold for it. Instead, you just get 300, right? Like, because you'd get the 100 bonus, the 100 bounty for them having 1 kill. It would be split amongst the team, but we're just getting less gold in basically every scenario. So getting less gold is like an interesting way to like slow the game down, I think, because obviously people get to like break points slower and things like that. People get to item break points, people get to critical mass, where like certain champions are become impossible to deal with like a lot slower, and that makes it so certain champions that take over team fights, like let's say you're playing like Jinx or something, you'll get more of the individual onus, but then that means there's more of a burden on your team to play around you more as the game progresses than like everybody benefiting from like your champion. So like if you have one team fight champion right now, your entire team can benefit from that one champion having a good team fight, whereas this is going to put like it's going to make it a lot more singularly minded, where the enemy will have a lot clearer focus of like, oh, we can punish this individual part of like their team because this individual part of their team has gotten an abundance of gold. These are interesting changes. The dying resets bounty to 0 instead of removing 3 bounty levels. Okay. So you can still die, not give them the bounty. Sick. Yeah, so let's do a quick recap. And then I'll move to the champion. So Scion, his E is a lot less strong. He gets more armor, a longer armor pen on the main target he does, and on everybody. And then his E now applies the armor reduction to other things. So if he gets into an extended fight, then he can do a little better potentially. But 9 times out of 10, like, he's just losing too much damage from this. He's losing like 25% damage from his roar, where he yells the creep at you, and that also hinders his ability to take to abuse Comet as much and just bully people out of lane with just range damage. So this will hurt Scion quite a bit, especially in range matchups. I don't think these really hurt Mundo very much because they don't hurt the things that he's already good into. They are slight nerfs. They will slightly lower his win rate, but I don't think they really they buffed his armor reduction duration and it applies to the things he throws the E back to, and they're giving it an AP ratio, which doesn't matter. But they lowered the damage by 5, and then it doesn't do an extra 30% damage for the thing you yelled at. So it used to do 273 damage on a yell, now it does 205. So it actually lost like 70 flat damage when you yell a creep, which is actually a huge flat nerf, which is why they're giving back some armor pen. And then Mundo, these don't make up for the fact that he got massive buffs last patch to the amount of healing he has. And then, like, he's still going to get his ultimate off in a fight, and he's still going to be really potent against mono damage types when he can build efficiently and just regen through it. So these don't really affect, like, the buffs that much. He'll lose very slight win rate, but he'll still be really good. Like, these aren't going to break him again or anything. Like, he's still going to be very strong, and he's very strong at the moment. These are placebo buffs. This is a placebo buff. This doesn't matter. I would have said this mattered if Runic Echoes was still not mana focused, but you lose too much of the value now if you were to go Runic Echoes. So you would always go Cinderhulk in those scenarios. This doesn't really matter. Bard, this can give him a few more opportunities to roam potentially. I think Mundo is generally better in top because he's less punishable and he can get more income, and he scales really well with that income. So this gives him more opportunities to roam. I said this is a placebo buff because it's 5 move speed, but it's like she's not being played enough, so Riot is giving her a very small buff so that more people will feel her out, right? Like a 5 movement speed buff is normally not. I don't think it's going to change her win rate by 2%. I actually highly doubt her win rate moves more than 1% at most, and I doubt it will move that much. This is more to encourage more people to play the champion. When they do these really small, like, 1 buff things, when it's just 1 buff, then they encourage, like, people to play the champion so they can get a better gauge of how the champion, like, actually performs. So when they give her this movement speed, maybe people find out that she's actually good because they gave her this small amount, and then that encourages more people to play her, more people to figure her out. She gets optimized a little bit, and then she improves from there. So lowering the mana cost on Caretaker Shrine gives him more opportunities to roam. Any roaming champion that gets reduced mana cost tends to get a lot of more opportunities to roam, so that's really valuable for them. This means that I don't have to flame my teammates when they grief me on Kindred anymore, so that's great. This is a very big buff to Runic Echoes, as it turns out, because you're only losing 7% movement speed, but you're gaining 10% CDR and 300 mana. That's a huge amount of gold value that you're getting now that you didn't have before, and this gives tank junglers a lot more room to buy Runic Echoes and then have more opportunities to gank. And then CDR can be used as a tank stat for some tank junglers, so I could see more tank junglers taking this for sure, and every AP jungler is basically just going to like this. Also, there's a better build path. Lost Chapter is a great item. Everybody loves building Lost Chapter, so granted it's Lost Chapter plus 300 gold, so it's not like you sit on the Lost Chapter for long, but having Lost Chapter in the jungle would feel really good because then you could do like a camp to like get the mana back to like jungle to like look for another gank or to continue like clearing your camps or something. So this is an interesting change. It punishes the windows that are already really telegraphed, and if junglers are going to have even more telegraphed routes because they want to do Rift Scuttle to hit an early 3, then wards are going to be incredibly valuable if they last this long early. This could be a buff to starting the game with oracles and clearing out these wards so that you can kind of defend like yourself from the vision that they can have and give yourself more options of like where you want to go. But these can extremely strongly influence junglers because of how long these wards last early. So if junglers have like really telegraphed routes for the jungle, then there's no reason that people shouldn't be able to play around it really effectively. So this, coupled with the fact that jungle camps are being changed and we're being tied to Rift Scuttle for a lot of the value, means that our routes could become relatively telegraphed. And if our routes are telegraphed, then it would be really easy to play around. And then Cheap Shot got a big buff. This is actually probably worth taking in a lot of cases now. It's probably just really potent. Ingenious Hunter's always been good. Phase Rush will be taken on the same champions that take it now. It's just better. Demolished in the same series. Bone Plating. Bone Plating is busted. Chrysalis is still good. Perfect Timing. Still not as early as it was before, so that's good, but still a good good change. Something that like, nobody really takes anymore. And these jungle changes are... There's a lot to iron out here. It works on slows. Cheap Shot works on slows. So... It's supposed to be... Yeah, you auto somebody... Or is it just that you do damage to somebody that's been CC'd? I don't remember. I think it's you auto somebody that's been CC'd and they take the damage. But it's a lot more potent now. A lot more. If it takes us 4 camps to hit level 3, then we're going to be behind pacing for basically the entire game, which is kind of silly, because junglers are supposed to have power points that they're hard to contest, and that they have like the power to like exert their will on the map, because those windows are normally really small anyway. Junglers already kind of fall behind solo lanes really easily, so if they're falling behind solo lanes, and then if we lose this much EXP across the board, then if we fall behind like duo lanes, then it becomes really unsafe to play aggressive junglers. Because if you're playing an aggressive jungler, a lot of your damage comes from your skills and from your levels. So, because your skills will level up, because your skills will level up with you, obviously, and you'll get more base damage. So if you're playing a damage jungler and you're the same level as bot lane when you go there, and you're playing it, and you aren't like more powerful than them anyway, or God forbid you're actually a little bit lower level than them, then they have the threat to kill you really easily when you come in, unless you're like a tank jungler, because then tank junglers get more safety when they try to make plays when they're further behind, because they have more durability when they go into these plays. So it's safer for them to make plays that are harder for squishy junglers to do. So this, if we are on a slower curve, people will naturally lean toward either super hard aggressive early junglers to try to take advantage of Rift Scuttle and try to punish people still, even though like they're going to have more availability of wards and the jungler needs to gank more because farming camps isn't going to be as worth it. Or we'll probably see a lot of utility-based tank junglers that don't need the EXP as much and will be useful regardless. Those champions are probably going to give up the Scuttle Crab early, unless it's like the other champions on the opposite side. So it could be like one or the other, and then if those are the polar opposites that are there, like aggressive junglers should be able to punish hard tank junglers that are like chilling and falling behind early. So in theory, that would be the dynamic I would expect, where we'd have like really aggressive junglers that want to gank a lot and take advantage of Scuttle priority, and then we'd have tank junglers that are really resilient, and then in competitive play they would default to the tank junglers because the tank junglers are going to be more consistent. So I could see this also causing people to split the map a lot, where if you want to guarantee that you get an early 3 and you know their jungler starting on a certain side, but you don't want to contest their jungler, like, let's say you're Zac and you want an early 3 because you wanted to try something somewhere, then you don't want to contest their Elise somewhere, right? So you don't want to test their Elise, you don't want to contest their Kha'Zix or something. So instead of starting on the opposite side of him, you start on the instead of starting on like the same side of him, where you both start on bot side, right, blue and red, then you start on the opposite side. So you start on blue, he starts on blue, so he paths up, you path down, and then you get that scuttle. My hands look retarded, I just look at it in the fucking thing, but so you'll probably be wanting to start opposite side, like if you're in a situation where you can't contest the enemy jungler as easily, if so much of the agency is put around Rift Scuttler, because there'll be 2 Rift Scuttles early, but then there'll only be 1 later in the game, so the first one could be really important for you to plan your route around. And then warding around mid lane on the exits to the jungle will become more valuable, because you want to be able to track the jungler through these kinds of places they can go, and if they're going to be honed in on the Scuttle Crab, then you want to be able to take advantage of the fact that a lot of their power comes from Scuttle Crab. Alright, and the last thing, bounties. So individual kill gold will go to players. This might slow snowballing of overall teams down a little bit, and it will give a little bit more gold to individual champions that are carrying, but individual champions that are carrying don't have as much agency in the game as is. So like the fact that you're getting less gold across the team, and I think a lot of the kills that you get are these. So having less gold available from those is a lot lost. Is a lot lost. So there's a lot of lost gold here for like team-wide, and that doesn't incentivize you to punish the champions that are super ahead as much, but if they get a lot of gold through the scenarios like this could give it like a really clear target for like to a team that's trying to stomp a game out. So like a team that, like, let's say they have a Jinx and their Jinx wins one team fight even though you guys were ahead, then you know that like their Jinx is the one that got most of the gold. So like you don't have to worry as much about like their overall team because you know where the gold is funneling to. Okay, and then I wanted to